Harry Kitten and Tucker Mouse, Part 3. "Isn't it wonderful?" said Harry, awestruck. He gazed at the stores, for some of the subway stations in New York have stores in them, and at the lunch counters and newspaper stands. But, oh, those neon lights, red, green, blue, a rainbow of colors. They were what fascinated him most. "I'm scared," said Tucker, who wasn't quite so fascinated. "I've never been in a place like this before." "It's marvelous." "Sure, marvelous. So where do we live?" "That remains to be seen. Discovered, I mean. I know the way in, but..." "But?" "I don't know the layout. Let's explore." "I've heard that before," said Tucker Mouse. But exploring they went, late at night, after hiding behind the trash can which most of the humans didn't bother to use, and when most of the commuters had pushed and crammed their way into the subway cars to get home. The station was more quiet then. They could do a little plowing in safety. Harry was still bewitched by the place, and Tucker had begun to be a little bit bewitched himself, especially by the smells that came from the lunch counters. They made his mouth water. "I might be happy here, Harry, after all," the mouse admitted breezily. "So might we both," said Harry. "But we've got to find a place of our own, a private place." "Like a home, you mean?" "Exactly, a home." It got late, and then, later, the people riding the subway grew fewer and fewer, theater-goers mostly yawning their long way home. And still no special place for a kitten and a mouse. "Let's go over near the shuttle," said Harry. "What's that?" "I think it's just a little short train that goes from Times Square to some place near." Beside the shuttle tracks there was a kind of run-down newsstand, all boarded up for the night. But it had a friendly look. "We could get in there," said Tucker. "Take a look at the cracks in those boards. Whoever owns it will open up in the morning. Then what?" Tucker sat on his haunches inside. So the Times Square subway station. Another no place to live. But Harry, whose eyes were sharper than Tucker's, had been glancing around through the gloom. He thought he saw... Was it? Yes, it was. A black opening in the wall. "There's a hole over there." "Big deal. A hole." "Come on, let's look." The hole was big and filthy. "Yuck, what a mess," said Tucker. "It could be cleaned, and also I don't think too many people know about this hole. It's a very neglected hole. And it smells. It's moldy, Harry." "Shh." "Why, shh? There's nobody here, and no one would want to be." "I said shh," Harry ordered. Then Tucker heard it, too. There was a faint splashing somewhere in back. "A leak, too. Shh." Harry crept to the back of the hole, and even in the dim light that filtered in from the subway, he could see that a trickle of water was falling. "It's clean," he exclaimed. "Come take a bath." "I don't want a bath." "You'll need a bath. And this water, it must be a leak from a copper pipe. Clean water in a subway hole. A true miracle. Now come on in here and we'll get clean too." Tucker sputtered and Harry laughed, and in a few minutes, after all their wandering through New York, the dirt they collected, inevitable for vagabonds, had all been washed away. They let the drifting air dry them off, and the air wasn't dirty either. It filtered in very softly through the opening of the hole. Many minutes went by. Then Harry said, "Tucker Mouse, this is our home." He heaved the biggest sigh that has ever been heard from a growing kitten. "It'll take a lot of cleaning." "Oh, Tucker," Harry said, "we're here at last." "Well, maybe it'll feel more like home when we spruce it up a little. It feels pretty good to me already. And also when I get my collection." Harry's eyes widened. "What collection?" Oh, I don't have it yet, said Tucker airily, but I intend to form a collection. A collection of what? Why, of everything, and I'll start with my penny, the one I left back on 10th Avenue. Do you mean to tell me, Harry's fur prickled, that you're going to go all the way back to 10th Avenue to retrieve 1 penny? I am indeed, said Tucker. This is one mouse that knows the value of a cent. And besides, it may have been the luck in that penny that found us this place. I'm living with a crazy mouse. Harry shook his head. If you can get all the way to 10th Avenue and then back here again safely, it won't be luck. It'll be another miracle. So you have your miracle with one in clear water, and I'll have mine with pennies. He grinned as a new thought crossed his mind. And maybe also nickels and dimes, and many other delightful things. But we have to clean this place out first. No collection of mine shall be housed in a dump. To work, then, said Harry. To work, said Tucker. If they had been men, they'd have rolled up their sleeves. But you can't roll up fur that's growing on you, so they just went to work. And that work took many days, or rather many nights, for they found it much safer to work at night when the subway was almost deserted. They threw out chips and chunks of plaster, little bits of concrete, and also the leftover human trash, like a rotten banana peel that had somehow found its way into the hole. You know, said Harry, when they were resting, exhausted one night, I think this was a drain pipe once that got all stuck up. Do you see those watermarks there? Let's hope that we don't clean it out so well that a flood comes crashing down the street. Oh, we won't, said Harry. It's stopped up for good, except for my delightful shower. That comes from a different set of pipes, I'm sure. And speaking of delightful things, said Tucker, tomorrow I go for my penny. Harry sighed. All right, if we must. Not we, I. Tucker, I will not let you go alone. I may still be a kitten, but I'm almost a cat, and... Harry, said Tucker, mouse-proud, I too am growing up, and this deed I must do alone. Harry narrowed his eyes and looked at his friend. What he saw quite silenced him. He looked away. If you must, I must. The next night, a new moon hung in the sky, hung high above the skyscrapers of New York, and it seemed like a little silver grin. Tucker and Harry came up to the sidewalk. By now they knew many secret ways there. A street wind from the west had swept the city queen. You're really going to do it? Asked Harry. I really am, said Tucker. So long. Be back in a flash. And the mouse was gone. Harry strained to get a last glimpse of him. Nothing. The kitten, who felt like a kitten now, alone and lonely, went into their home. Their home? He wondered. Or was it only his? His alone. He curled and uncurled a dozen times, but sleep would not come. Late travelers hurried by, and they too, most of them, looked worried, as if they also had problems that might not be resolved. Poor human beings, poor animals, thought Harry, sighing. A young man dropped a token, and then couldn't find it. He said some very nasty words. But Harry saw where it had landed. He rushed out and pushed the token right next to the young man's feet. Hey, wow, the man shouted. You are some cat. He was wearing a fuzzy blue beret. Thanks, Catkins. But Harry had hurried back to his home, where he waited, and waited, and waited. And along with his waiting, his worry grew heavier and heavier, until a plink sounded in the drain pipe. "Here's the penny." "You found it and got back?" "I think it should be." Tucker glanced around. "Above the mantelpiece." Just casually, he threw in, "I did have trouble with that sanitation truck. Those big wheels, you know. Well, I do think the mantelpiece. Except we have no mantelpiece." His eyes wandered here and there. "How about above the entrance to the drain pipe?" "Great!" Harry looked away and blinked. "Just great. You put it there, though. It's yours." "It is ours," said Tucker. He placed the penny carefully on a little wedge of stone that stood out above the drain pipe opening. "There. Now, that's a beginning." And indeed, a beginning it was. For now Tucker Mouse truly knew that collecting things, scrounging, he called it, was his vocation. And vocation is what human beings call their life's work. He was very lucky, Tucker was, in small change. Apart from pennies, he found a few nickels, and on one glorious afternoon, a quarter. "The bliss of it," he crooned. But as well as cash, he also found funny human things, like a lady's crazy hat, droopy and blue, with a vivid pink feather. "Will you look at that?" "I'm looking," said Harry. "It's very ordinary." "Ordinary is nice," said Tucker Mouse. And all the time that Tucker Mouse had been collecting, scrounging, Harry had been swinking and watching and observing the subway station, and wisely he observed it all. He'd observed that there was one man with a red necktie who always made his train if he wore that red necktie, and if he didn't wear it, he lost. The doors closed on his face. His luck is in his necktie, Harry thought. Maybe. Harry Cat observed a lot, and thought and thought. "So what are you looking so gloomy for?" asked Tucker one night. He was especially happy that night. He'd found 2 dimes. "There are others living here besides us 2, said Harry Cat. "And if you don't believe me, just look across the tracks." Tucker looked. 6 eyes, 2 by 2, were staring at them. "Who are they?" "Rats, and worse than those miserable creatures we met on the docks." "Rats, and they're big. They live in garbage cans, and they're looking at us." "Just jealous," said Tucker. "Maybe," said Harry, "but I want to grow big, very fast. You've been so busy collecting you haven't seen the eyes. Just look at them." Across the subway tracks, those eyes of 3 rats, steely greedy, all stared at Tucker and Harry. "And garbage cans. Who would live there?" "Someone hungry." Tucker tried to make the best of it. "Who has no place else to live. You and I weren't doing so well ourselves for a while." "We never stooped to garbage cans." Harry grumbled in his throat. "I just don't like the look of those eyes. I like the man with the red necktie, and I like the lady who only wears sneakers, but I don't like those eyes. They've been staring at us for days now." "They have?" "I'll say. Those guys are big, too." "Well, you keep an eye on those eyes," said Tucker. "I'm sure it'll be all right." I wonder," said Harry. And secretly, although he put on a brave face, Tucker too began to worry. He had grown so fond of his collection, the buttons and bits of ribbon, not to mention the money. The thought of anyone preying on them made his fur bristle. In the course of the next few days, Tucker's worry grew and grew. He finally had to talk about it. "Harry," he said one night, "you don't think those rats would steal anything from my collection?" "They might." "But why? I only collect the things I like. And even the money, I just like to look at those lovely dimes. And sometimes roll around in them. So who is harmed if every now and then I take a nickel wince? But rats don't like beautiful things. What good would they be to them anyway? I'll give you an example, said Harry. You remember what you found yesterday? Tucker sighed. Just costume jewelry, but gorgeous. Yes, well, a rat could steal that pin and drop it in one of the lunch counters. And while the waitresses were fighting over who found it first, he could eat up a pound of hamburger. Oh, dear! Tucker wrung his front paws. They would use my treasures? You bet they would, because rats are users, and they have no sense of beauty at all. Now Tucker's worry turned to panic. He was so panic-stricken that he almost stopped collecting completely. But not if an especially choice item, like a lady's hairpin, just happened to fall outside the drain pipe opening. The days wore on. The 6 eyes stared. And Tucker Mouse thought he might just lose his mouse mind. But even he had to sweep sometimes. He woke up one night. It was very late, and saw Harry staring out into the subway. Is something wrong? He jumped to his feet. I thought I heard something. Tucker Mouse did not have time to ask what. The raid was upon them. However, it didn't feel like a raid at first. Hi, guys, said the biggest rat. I thought we ought to get acquainted. Oh, delighted to, said Harry Cat, and flashed a warning glance at Tucker. The strangest thing about these rats was they all looked alike. One was huge and one was middle-sized, and one might be called Whittle, although he was at least twice as big as Tucker Mouse. Their fur was a kind of dirty gray, and there was dirt on it. But their eyes, oh, their eyes were identical. Sharp, fierce, piercing, and full of malice. I'm Charlie, said the biggest rat. I assume that means Charlie, said Harry Cat. Yeah, Charlie means Charlie, said Charlie Rat. And this is Spud. He pointed a claw at the middle-sized rat. So-called 'cause potatoes is his favorite food. And the one is the bump, for the reason that looms at the end of his nose. The bump had a nervous laugh, if one could call it a laugh. It was more like a high, queer shriek. Yeah, the bump! I'm the bump! He squealed with delight. I wish you wouldn't do that, said Tucker. It's very upsetting. So upset, said the bump. We all got our problems. His mad laughter fluttered insanely again. I am not happy, Harry, Tucker said to his friend. Why, said Charlie. It's just a friendly call. Yeah, so us guys can get to know yous guys, said Spud. Tucker shot Harry a very nervous look. In fact, I am very unhappy, Harry. You notice how nice the little mousie smells? Said Charlie to Spud. I took a shower before retiring tonight, said Tucker. It's a practice I strongly urge all you 3 to adopt. This remark brought forth the wildest giggling yet from the bump. By now, inch by inch, the rats had edged their way into the drain pipe. Harry and Tucker found themselves backed against one wall. So, a mouse and a kitten living together, said Charlie. A very strange combination. I am not a kitten, said Harry, with as much conviction as he could. I'm a cat. You still are a kitten, with a kitten's little whiskers. Charlie flicked Harry's whiskers with one claw. Then he flicked his own. "Whereas these are the whiskers of a full-grown rat." "Well, it's been nice to meet you," squeaked Tucker. "If there's anything else you should need, like a shower—" "Need," said Charlie, and a glint of teeth appeared behind an evil smile. "We don't need nothing, but there's something we want." The sound that came from his mouth was part snarl, part growl, and part hiss. "We want what we've been seeing you rake in this hole, my little freaky furry friend, and we're gonna get it. So don't fight, don't argue, just hand over all you got." "My life savings!" shrieked Tucker. "If that's what you call the loot, yeah, your life savings." I will not!" And shivering though he was, a bit from the dampness still in his fur, since he hadn't dried himself too well earlier, Tucker Mouse stamped his foot. "No, never!" "Yeah, you will," said Charlie, in a quiet, deadly kind of voice, as if bored, as if the whole awful transaction had already been completed. "Or else I'll hurt you very bad, and then take the stuff anyway." At that, Hairy Cat blew up. "I told you," he shouted at Tucker. "These are bums. They'd plant a dime just to bite someone's leg who was picking it up." "Not a bad idea," chuckled Charlie Rat. "The kitty's got a sense of humor. And by the way, we'll be back every month to collect what yous have picked up in the meantime." "No!" Now Harry, too, spoke quietly, although his voice broke a little since Charlie was white. He wasn't a cat yet. "No, you will not. You will not take one item of my friend's possessions. And furthermore, you will leave these premises, which are our home, right now, and go back to whichever filthy garbage can you call your home." For a moment, Charlie Rat just stared at this dopey little kitten, whose fur was still fuzzy, and who had challenged him, given him, Charlie Rat, an order to go. But only for a moment did Charlie Rat stare. Then he lunged at Harry and sank his hideous sharp teeth into the kitten's shoulder. Harry screamed, as a cat can scream, not simply yowl, for the pain was horrible. But Tucker didn't scream. He roared. A real roar for a very small mouse. Then he went for Charlie and bit his tail. "Ow! Ow!" And the rat let go of Harry. Tucker bit in deeper. Charlie bared all his teeth, and Tucker knew that for him at least the fight was over. He might as well be dead. But he wasn't dead, because once those fangs were out of his shoulder, Harry jumped on Charlie's back and started clawing as best as he could with claws that weren't yet grown. Meanwhile, the two other rats had been gawking. They couldn't believe that a kitten and a mouse would fight back, and particularly at their boss, Charlie Rat. But now they knew they had to join the battle, too. They had to help Charlie, because if they didn't, he'd skin them alive. A frenzy, a frantic and furious chaos of claws, paws, teeth, tails now occurred. No one was winning. But suddenly Charlie Rat shouted, "Hold it!" In the fury, the fighting, the scratching and biting, the whole situation had ended like this. Harry Kitten, who now was definitely Harry Cat, had managed to flatten Charlie. The rat lay on his back, and Harry sprawled over him, and Tucker Mouse, with the tiny instinct that small persecuted people have, had raised one small but very sharp claw above Charlie's tender nose. "Stop! Stop!" shouted Charlie. "Ooh! Ooh! My nose!" "You better stop," Tucker said. For a mouse, he suddenly felt very strong. "And you'd better tell your friends to go home. Otherwise," it was horrible, but to save their home, "otherwise, I'm going to claw a good gouge from your nose." and he only hoped that his claws were big enough to carry out his threat. Go on, you guys, whimpered Charlie Wat. He didn't sound one single bit like his former bragging and bluster to himself. Go on, go back to the garbage can. My nose, ooh. Oh, wow, said the bump, who hadn't said a single word till then. And I thought I was the coward. He tittered again. Hee-hee-hoo. The bump and the spud backed out of the Dwayne pipe. Very gingerly, Harry and Tucker let Charlie go, and he went fast, out of shame as well as pain. Neither mouse nor cat had the strength to speak. For at least 5 minutes there was only relief, peace. He said they'd be back in a month, Tucker Mouse finally found the breath to say. Now don't worry. Harry Cat had long since realized that the best way, the only way to quiet his friend was to flatten him gently on the floor with a paw, claws in. With all the lunch stands here, I'll be able to eat a lot, and in 1 month. He reared up on his hind legs and showed off his glowing muscles. In just 1 month, I'll be so big that all the rats in New York will tremble. Most of all, those hooligans. Very impressive, I must say, said Tucker, who knew that the rest of his life he would always be a mouse. And by the way, Harry tapped Tucker's head. Mousikins, you saved my wife by biting that nasty creature's tail. Yes, and you saved my wife's savings, said Tucker. Harry Cat had to laugh at that, and it wasn't just the purring murmur of a cat's delight. It was more like the howling, yowling of mirth and happiness and safety and home. And, of course, they are equally important. My life and your life savings, that is. Oh, Harry, I didn't mean... But Tucker was abruptly distracted. A splash of silver fell at his feet. Come on, Master Mouse. I was only kidding. Look, Harry. At a certain hour of the night, a ray of moonlight, if the moon was full, fell through a grating above in Times Square, and fell like a silent poem, a prayer, in front of the drain pipe where Harry and Tucker now lived. They both looked at the silvery light, and then they went out to get the feel of it on their backs. The moonlight made the fur of both animals shine. It felt as if it were shining inside them, too. Tucker Mouse was silent, and then he coughed. The late stillness of the subway station, so beautiful and difficult, just had to be broken. And then it was really broken. Harshly, a clattering train rushed in. One man ran to catch it and made it. A lady cried, "Oh, please wait!" The man firmly held the door open for her. "Oh, thank you," she said. The train sped away. "I'm glad she caught it," murmured Tucker. But Harry said nothing. He shone. And that is the end of Harry Kitten and Tucker Mouse by George Selden with art by Garth Williams. I hope you enjoyed that book so very much. I definitely did. And I want to read another book by George Selden and Garth Williams because it really warmed my little mouse heart. And I hope it warmed your heart too, whether human, mouse, or otherwise. Goodbye.